So, our title for our study today is Seeing Connections in the Story of Moses. Okay, so I'd like to direct you to Exodus. And we're going to look at, I don't know when was the last time you read the book of Exodus, but lately I've been kind of drawn to the book of Exodus because I want to go through the whole story. I've been kind of drawn to the big epic stories in the Bible, like the story of Moses and the children of Israel. It was quite a long trek for them to make it from Egypt to the promised land and all the things that happened in between. And also the story of David. That was pretty epic too, where the David's story from being a shepherd and all the way to the point where his kingdom grew to the end when he died at the end. So these are the stories that are so epic that you can't really go over it all in a particular study. However, there are very good little gems that you can run into as you study. And so, welcome, Chris. Glad you joined us. And so, I'd like to invite you to turn with me to Exodus chapter 2. Exodus chapter 2, and maybe I could share my screen here so that for those who don't have the benefit of looking at a Bible or they're driving as they're listening, they will have it. Well, don't look at this while you're driving, but if you happen to be at a stoplight and you see you have a moment, you can take a glance at the screen, but please keep your eyes on the road if you're driving. Okay, so Exodus chapter 2 is where we're going to look at. And so let me share my screen here. Okay, so Exodus chapter 2. And I want to encourage you guys to also follow along in your own Bibles. Actually, it's more beneficial when you actually are taking notes and really actively engaged in the Bible. Because I don't want, for those who are just joining us, I don't want you guys to be passive learners. Our sessions that we have week after week is not meant for me to just lecture, but I really encourage participation and interaction because there's a different your mind is more active when you're actually engaged. If you're just a spectator and you're listening, you're not going to get the maximum benefit as you would if you really immerse yourself into the topic for each session. So I really encourage you to take out your Bibles, Exodus chapter 2, and for those who can see it on the screen there, it's already there. I'd like a volunteer to read Exodus chapter 2, 1 through 10. And of course, as whoever is reading, I hope that you guys are jotting down little things that sometimes pop out. Because when you study or read a passage, things will tend to pop up. Things that you probably didn't notice before, and the Holy Spirit's bringing to your mind. That's a time for you to jot those things down. And by all means, share it with us as we go through this. Okay, so let's take a look at Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 through 10. And I'd like to have a volunteer to read this. And as somebody is mustering up the courage to read this, I would like to just give you a little context. Chapter 1 talks about this death decree that was issued by Pharaoh to kill all the baby boys. And the reason for this is because the Hebrews were growing at an exponential rate in Egypt, and this was seen as a threat. So, to control the population of the Hebrews, Pharaoh commands that they destroy all the baby Hebrew boys. And so, this is the context for those who are not familiar with the story. Okay, in chapter 2, we see that the story continues after this death decree for the young Hebrew baby boys was actually in effect. And so we're going to pick up where chapter 2 takes us from verse 1 through verse 10. Can someone read verse 1 through verse 10?
I'll read.
Thank you, Maxine.
And the man of the house of Levi went and took as wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, dabbed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, "This is the one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water."
Okay, so notice the narrative here. Thank you for reading that, Maxine.
You're welcome.
What I want you to do, and what we always try to do, is make sure that we let the Bible speak for us. Okay, so we don't want to get into speculation. We don't want to get into our opinions. It's all about letting the Bible speak. And what does the Bible say? And we go by that. So, what I want to do, when we study the Bible, there are 3 steps that we go through. We go through observation, interpretation, application. So, let's take a moment to do just that. We're going to do the first step, observation. What are some things you guys notice about this passage that we read? Some things that you can observe just by reading this narrative. What are some things that you actually notice or you can clearly observe?
Moses' mom kept him up until that she couldn't hide him anymore.
Okay. All right. So Moses' mother was actually keeping him hidden
Right.
for some time. Right. How long?
It doesn't say.
It does say.
Yeah,
Oh,
3
hold on.
months. 3 months.
Oh,
3
okay.
months. She hid him
3
3
months.
months.
Okay.
Mhm.
And
Oh, okay. Never mind.
yeah,
First of all.
that's verse 2.
Mhm.
She hid him 3 months. So that's quite a long time if you think about it. If for a newborn baby to kind of keep it hidden when a newborn baby is crying and has needs, and you can't keep a baby quiet for long. Someone's going to notice.
Yes.
And so, seeing that it was not possible to hide him, of course, we see what she does next. She puts him in an ark, right? Okay, good observation. Any other things you guys observe from the story? And then I'll share mine. Let's get 2 more. 2 more observations from the story.
Pastor Choice, Marine.
Okay, yes.
Not so much an observation, maybe just a question. During the time when Jesus was born, Herod had the boys killed because he was fearful of a king coming on his throne. But I guess I wondered why Pharaoh would kill the boys and not just kill the babies. Why just the boys?
Why just the boys?
The males, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm sure there's a lot of reason for that. I guess the boys or males have the ability to produce offspring, and so that's a way to actually, eliminate any possibility for the Hebrews to multiply or to reproduce. I think that's the main thing, but there could be more to it than that. But yeah, that's a good question. Good observation. Good question. Okay, any others? Let's take one more.
Good night. Good evening, everyone. All right, so I wanted to say that I noticed that Pharaoh's daughter had, I would want to say, some compassion in her due to the fact that when she found the child, she knew instantly that, the child was a Hebrew child, which of course she knew her father would have been, against. But
Right.
instead of reporting this baby that she found, she decided that she's going to care for this child as her own.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a very good insight that you brought out, Sanjay, because no doubt the Pharaoh's daughter was very aware of this command that went out through the land. So they were all. She was not ignorant of it. She was very much aware. And here she happens to see a baby that comes up in an ark right at the moment she comes to the river to wash. And so, yeah, she could put two and two together, but she also had compassion, like you said. She had compassion on the child, and she had an endearment towards that child, and she even went as far as to adopt that child as her own. And so that's pretty significant. You see that definitely God at work here. This is a very risky thing for the mother to do, but God is definitely at work, and you see things happening as the story progresses. One of the things I've noticed, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I noticed that when you read from chapter 2, verse 1 through 10, one of the things I noticed is that none of the names of the characters are specifically mentioned. In other words, the mother's name is not mentioned, the father's name is not mentioned, right? Even the sister is not mentioned, right? We know the names, but if you look at this narrative, it doesn't mention any of their names. Nobody's name is mentioned except for the Levi, which is the house of Levi. It just tells you which family or tribe they're from. But other than that, there's no other name, right? So until the very end, when the Pharaoh's daughter names the baby, what does she name the baby?
Moses.
Moses. Okay. Now, what does the name Moses mean?
Drawn out of the water.
Drew him out of the water.
Okay, drawn from the water. Okay, so that's what Moses means. Very appropriate name given how she found him, right? Another thing I noticed is that the baby Moses was placed in an ark. So when you think about ark, what do you think about?
Ark of the Covenant.
Covenant.
Okay, so how many arks are there in the Bible that we know of?
3.
3. Okay, what are they?
Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, and this one.
Okay, Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, and this one. Okay, so it's interesting. So what is an ark? Well, and one of my children asked me, like, why is it called an ark? And that's a good question. Why is it called an ark? What is an ark? How can you find out what an ark is?
Dictionary.
Is what?
Dictionary.
Dictionary. Yeah, you go to the dictionary, you go to ark, and then what does it say? Let's do that. So those watching, we do ark. Click on ark. It's a vessel which Noah built, basket vessel which Moses was placed, and actually it's the same word that's used for the Ark of the Covenant as well. Okay, so we see ark is clearly a vessel of some sort, a vessel that houses something. Okay, so that's something that's very interesting for us to consider as we continue to observe. But it's interesting. Moses' name means drawn from the water. You guys just said that. You guys know that. And we see that Moses was drawn from the water. He was, in a sense, delivered from what? What was he delivered from?
I would almost say death.
Yeah, he was delivered from death, this death decree, right? He was delivered from this death decree. He is drawn out of the water to be delivered. Are you following?
Yes.
So he's delivered for what purpose?
To save the Hebrews, save
Yeah,
the
so,
children.
so he's delivered to be a deliverer. And he is saved in order to save others. Right? And so this is interesting. Was Moses aware of his purpose?
No,
No.
Okay.
in fact, he didn't think he was good enough.
Let's read verse
He
11.
was aware when he killed the Egyptian, because he
Okay.
saw that his people were
Let's,
suffering.
let's read verse 11. Okay, we just read verses what?
1 through 10.
1 through 10. Okay, and 1 through 10 is very interesting. 1 through 10 talks about when he's a baby. He's given the name Moses. He's adopted into Pharaoh's household through the daughter. And then it makes a significant jump from verse 10 to verse 11.
Mm.
A significant gap is missing in Moses' life. Okay? It doesn't talk about anything else, but now in verse 11, from verse 10, he's a baby. Verse 11, boom, he is fully grown. Okay? So take a look at verse 11, and we're going to see the connections here. Verse 11 and 12. Someone read that for us.
Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren.
And verse 12.
So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand.
Okay. So what do you see happening here? First of all, Moses, is he a baby?
No, he was all grown up at this point.
Grown.
He was grown, right?
Yeah.
And what did he do? What happened? What's the first thing that? Okay, so here we see. You got to watch. You got to track the narrative here. Whoever wrote Exodus, right? They're talking about Moses, and it talks about him when he's a baby, and it jumps from baby to fully grown adult, right?
Mhm.
And now here he is. What's the first thing we know about Moses? Right from the get-go. He's an adult, but what does he do?
Kill someone.
He knew that the Hebrews were his brethren.
Exactly.
Mm.
He knew, he went out unto his brethren, so he knew the Hebrews were his brethren, right?
Mm.
He was not oblivious to this. He was not, ignorant of this. And it says what? What did he do? He went out unto his brethren and what did
He
it say?
looked at their burdens.
He looked
They
on their
spied
burdens.
on the Egyptians.
He looked on their burdens, and what did he spy?
An Egyptian smiting Hebrew.
Egyptian doing what?
Beating.
Hebrew,
Being a Hebrew, and what does it add?
one of his brothers.
One of his brethren. So does Moses know who he is?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. He knows his identity, right? He knows he's a Hebrew. He knew he was grown in the courts of Pharaoh, but yet he cannot deny his own brethren. Okay? And then it's interesting. It says, verse 12, he what did he do? When he saw this happening, this Egyptian smiting his brethren, what did he do?
He looked both ways.
He looked both ways. Why did he look both ways?
Because
See if there was anyone.
see what?
To ensure
Right.
there was no one to see what he was about to
And
do.
nobody was going to see what he's going to do. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then what did he do?
Killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand.
Slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Okay. Now, it's very interesting. Moses means drawn from the water. He is delivered from the death decree. He was delivered to be a deliverer. He was saved to save others.
Mm.
Moses, I believe, knew this. And you're going to say, how do we know that? Well, it doesn't say it in the Bible, but you could kind of think about what could have transpired, because who raised Moses?
His birth mom.
But
His birth mother, right? His birth
Mhm.
mother raised him, because that's what it says in the previous verses. The Pharaoh's daughter hired her to raise him. So no doubt there was some education that the birth mother had, this window of opportunity to educate her son before she sent him off to the courts of Egypt.
Mm.
Can we assume that would be possible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Therefore, he knows who the Hebrews are, because verse 11 and 12 tells us he knew who he was. He knew who his brothers were. He knew who he was. Did he not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is all based on observation, right?
Mhm.
We're looking at just what the text tells us, and we're going by that. Maureen has her hand raised. Maureen, you have a comment?
Yes. So Moses' mother, Jochebed, raised Moses, but it wasn't until God actually spoke to Moses, with the burning bush, I think, because I don't think the Bible says anything. I don't think Jochebed knew Moses' calling. I think she just made sure that he knew his roots. She made sure he knew where he came from. Even though you're going to be living in the palace, these are your brothers, these are your sisters. I don't know, Pastor Troy, if he knew that he was the deliverer of the
Okay,
people.
but let's think about this though. Let's think about this. Okay, if you were Moses' mother and you knew that your son was destined to die, okay, let's think about it realistically. And you see that through some divine intervention, when you take your son and put him on a little basket on an ark and send him away, not knowing, fearing for what's going to become of that son of yours. And all of a sudden, by happenstance,
Mm.
an Egyptian daughter picks up that boy, and instead of throwing him into the river, she adopts him and further decides to take him in as her own in the royal courts, to be raised in royalty, to be possibly the next ruler of Egypt. When you see all that transpiring, do you not see the hand of God in it? Yes or no?
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Do you see that
Yeah.
God is actually working
Mhm.
to not only spare Moses, but to set him up for something special?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you think the mom is thinking the entire Hebrew
I'm not saying
population,
the
or maybe just
mom
his
is.
family?
I'm not saying
Okay.
the mom is.
Okay.
I'm saying Moses probably realized this. And in verse 11 and 12, he probably realizes to the point that he's compelled to do something.
Okay.
Okay. That's what we can get from these verses, right? It's no doubt that what happened to Moses was like 1 in a million, that something like that could happen to him. And he was destined to be a great man in Egypt, to assume a great position in Egypt as a result of this turn of favorable events. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, the potential was there, right? That's all we're saying. And Moses was aware of this, being raised in the royal courts. But yet he did not forget his roots, based on what we see in verse 11 and 12. Okay, so that's all we're saying. We're not going to the realm of speculating. We're just kind of saying this. It's probable if we just put if we put ourselves in the shoes of these characters and we see all that has transpired over the course of time, seeing things in hindsight, right? We can see that clearly God had his hand over Moses. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And you're going to see more connections as we go further into this. Okay, now it's interesting. There is two words that keep repeating in verse 11 and 12. Remember, I told you when you study the Bible, focus on what words?
Repeated words.
Repeated words, but also what words?
Action word.
Action words. Very good, Elnora. So focus on words that are repeated, words that have action. What word do you see in verse 11 and 12 that repeats and has action?
Looked.
Okay, looked. That's good. Looked. Okay, good. I didn't notice that one.
Mm.
All right, what else? And you probably won't see this very clearly in the English text, but it's there.
Is smitten and slew the same?
That's it. That's it. Smiten and slew. Now look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. So you know it's not me saying this. Okay. If I put the Strongs, okay, look at verse 11 and 12. The first word is smiting. Look at that. Okay. The number is H5221. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
That's the word for smiting. H5221. Okay. If you look at the next verse, verse 12, it says he slew the Egyptian. When you look at that, what number is that? The same one. H5221. It's the same word. Okay, smiting and slew. In the English, it's slightly a variant. It says smite, and the other one says slew. But in the Hebrew, they're both the same.
Can I be technical and ask a question based on observation just now?
I'm sorry?
May I permission to be a little technical based on observation?
Sure.
All right, so we know looked is the same word. However, I realize that the reference numbers are different in the both verses.
Right. So looked is different. Looked here is 7,200. Looked here is 6437. Yeah,
right.
So slightly different, right? Although same English word.
Is it because of context?
I think there's a different meaning for those words.
Okay.
Or a different variant of those words. But that's definitely what you can do. When you study the Bible this way, you can find things out like this. Right? And so it's a very good observation. But let's take a look at 5221. If you click on the word smiting and slew, which is both the same word, when you click on that, is the word nakah in the Hebrew. Okay. Now, you guys are probably saying, big deal, who cares? Hebrew has no bearing on me. Why are you going over this? But just stick with me. Just follow along, because this is really amazing. We're talking about connections, finding connections in the story of Moses. This is really amazing, okay? So just remember nakah. The only Hebrew word I'm asking you to remember today is nakah, which means what? It means what?
Strike.
To strike, smite, hit, beat, slay, kill. Okay? That's what nakah means. Okay, you guys got it?
Mhm.
So if you look at the original text, it says, it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. He spied an Egyptian smiting or nakah, a Hebrew, one of his brethren. He looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there's no man, he slew, nakad, the Egyptian, and hid him in the sand. Okay, so the word of focus is what?
Nakah.
Nakah, okay, which means to smite or to kill, right? Now it's interesting. Tuck that in the back of your head. We see Moses, he thought to take upon himself to deliver that Hebrew from the Egyptian, in this way, his own way. But was that the way that God wanted Moses to deliver his people?
No.
No.
No, clearly not, right? But notice, did Moses take matters into his own hands to achieve
Yes.
God's purpose?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And what resulted from that? What resulted from that? You guys know the story. If you like scan further down, what resulted from Moses taking matters into his own hands to supposedly deliver his oppressed brethren?
He fled.
He fled. He fled Egypt, right? He was
Yes.
banished and he fled from Egypt. Okay? So this is interesting. The same pattern of Moses emerges. Okay? In the beginning, we see there's water involved that has to do with saving. Second, there is smiting or nakah involved. And then there's this instance, Moses takes matters into his own hands to do God's work. Okay? So are you guys following those three things?
Yes.
Okay. Water involved, that has to do with what? Saving.
Yes.
Okay.
There is smiting or nakah involved. Okay. Third, there's another instance where this is an instance where Moses takes matters into his own hands to do God's work. Okay.
But Pastor, at the time he did that, he didn't know he was supposed to do God's work.
Okay. This is the same thing that Maureen brought up. But if you actually look at the spirit of prophecy, it kind of says that he did have an idea. Okay. And him being in that position made him also think that even more. Okay, because after all, he is the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He was in a very advantageous position. And who placed him there? Obviously, it was not from his own accord, but God definitely made that happen. So you put one and one together, you think, oh, then this is my purpose in life. I'm here to somehow deliver my brethren. That's why I'm placed here at this moment in my life. Okay? Why else would the narrative jump right to Moses doing this? Right? Right after he was saved, and he goes right into this trying to save his oppressed brother, Hebrew brother. Okay, the narrative, you cannot ignore how the narrative places these things. It's not happenstance. There is something that the narrator wants you to notice. The Bible writer wants you to notice, and you're going to see why. Okay? But very good that you're thinking. Now, what are the three things? The pattern, water involved, that has to do with saving. Moses was delivered to be saved, right? There's a smiting involved. Moses sees this Egyptian smiting his brethren. He then smites him and kills him. And then this is an instance where Moses took matters into his own hands to do God's work, okay, which was not what God ordained. Now, this is at the beginning of chapter 2, the start of Moses' life. Okay. Now, fast forward. We have the ability to rewind and forward. Okay, fast forward to Numbers chapter 20. Okay, let's take a look there. Numbers chapter 20. And let's see what we find out here. Numbers chapter 20, verse 1 through 13. Okay, as we are turning there, Verda has her hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to put something out. I'm not sure if you could probably answer it or not, but I was thinking along the lines with Moses, when you said that he was trying to do God's work his own way, take matters in his own hand. Could it be that Moses thought he was doing God's work and doing it that way because of how he was raised? You know what I'm saying? He was raised as a fighter, or, as
In the court of
someone,
the Pharaoh, training,
yes,
due to his training.
yes.
Yeah. So that's a good insight. That could possibly be right, using those methods, because he was, after all, trained in those methods. So why not deliver his people with those methods?
Yes.
Right. Use the enemy's training and the methods against them for the sake of his people. He's like an insider to work against the powers that were to be at the time. So yeah, that's very possible. Possible. Okay. Are we at Numbers chapter 20?
Yeah.
Okay. Numbers chapter 20. Now, the story of, okay, this is talking about the water. Interesting, water. The people were complaining about the lack of water, right? Verse 2. There's no water for the congregation, and they gathered themselves together against Moses and Aaron. And the people chided with Moses and said, "Would God that we died when our brethren died before the Lord. Why have you brought us up to the congregation of the Lord in this wilderness, that we and our cattle should die there? And wherefore have you made us to come up out of Egypt to bring us into this evil place? It's no place of seed or figs or vines or pomegranates, neither is there any water to drink." Again, water is being mentioned. Water is the issue. And Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. They fell upon their faces. Glory of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, "Take the rod, gather thou the assembly together, thou, Aaron thy brother, and speak ye unto the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth his water. Thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock, so thou shalt give the congregation and their beasts drink." And Moses took the rod from the Lord as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation before the rock. So far, so good. He's doing what the Lord told him to do. And he said unto them, "Hear now, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock?" That's a little off character, Moses.
Mhm.
And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice. And the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also. Verse 12, and the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron, "Because you believed me not, to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. This is the water of Meribah, because the children of Israel strove with the Lord, and he was sanctified in them." So what happens here? What pattern do we see repeated? This is near the end of their journeys in the wilderness. Okay.
Water, smite.
Water's involved, right? People say, "We're going to die. We don't have water. We and our beasts are going to die." And they murmured, didn't they? They murmured and complained and blamed God and Moses that they were brought out to die for lack of water. Okay. And then, what did Moses do?
Smite the rock.
He smote the rock. Now check this out. Strong's. And we look at which verse did he smite them? The rock. He smote the rock on verse 12. Look at this. Same number. Same number, same word. Nakah. He nakad the rock. You see that? He nakad the rock. Was that good or bad?
Bad.
Bad.
Bad. Why?
He disobeyed God.
Because what did God tell him to do?
Speak to the rock.
To the
Speak
rock.
to the rock, right? He said, "Speak to the rock." And instead, he smote the rock. Not once, but twice. Okay, out of anger. and saying, "You rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock?" So notice he's saying, should we bring this water out for you? So in other words, he's taking the prerogative upon himself as the one who brings the water to him, right? And he did it his own way, not God's way, by smiting the rock. He nakad the rock. So this is another instance where Moses did not do what God said, but he took matters into his own hands in a fit of rage. Do you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. And so this actually cost Moses and Aaron their entrance into the promised land. Because of this, they were not allowed into the promised land. Right? And so it's interesting. Those three, the pattern begins at the beginning of Moses' life. Water, smiting, matters into his own hands. And here, near the end, on the borders of the promised land, Moses, there's water, he's smiting involved and taking matters in his own hands, which costed him. Right? Now, why did God tell him to speak to the rock and not strike it? Did Moses strike the rock before?
Yes.
Yes.
In Elim.
Okay, but was that what God told him to do?
No.
Yes.
He says to speak.
No. I'm talking about the first time.
The first time, yeah.
The first time God told him to
Strike.
strike the rock, right?
Yes.
This time, the second time, he did not tell him to strike the rock.
He was told to speak to the
He
rock.
was told to speak to the rock because it was struck already the first time. And Moses this time was told to speak to the rock the second time, but instead he smites the rock twice. And because Moses took matters into his own hands to achieve God's purpose in his own way, which was not the right way that God wanted, he was banished
From Canaan.
from Canaan. Just like he was banished from Egypt. The pattern, the connection. It's very interesting.
So
Now,
there is an application there.
what is the application, Elnora?
Jesus can only strike once.
Okay. So what
Jesus
did that
can
rock?
die,
What did that rock?
die second time for
What did
us.
that rock
He
represent?
dies.
Jesus.
Christ.
Represented Christ, right?
Yes.
The rock that was smitten. It was Christ. And the second time he was supposed to speak to the rock. And because Moses disobeyed and ruined this illustration that God wanted to sanctify the people with, he was barred from the promised land. Now, interesting. The rock represents who?
Christ.
Christ. Where in the Bible do we see that Jesus was nakad or smitten?
Cross.
When he was crucified.
Where in the Bible?
In Isaiah, isn't it?
Isaiah what?
I want to say 53, but I'd have to look.
You're right. Isaiah 53.
Yes.
Right, very good. Very good. Isaiah 53.
He was smitten for our iniquities, and the chastisement of our peace was upon him.
No, you're misquoting it.
He was bruised for our iniquities.
Bruce, yes. Bruce,
The
right?
chastisement of the peace was upon him.
That's verse 5. I'm looking at verse 4. And look at this. Verse 4. Surely he has borne our griefs and has carried our sorrows, yet we did not esteem him stricken and what?
Smitten by God.
Smitten by God. And look at that. The word smitten. H5221, same word as
Nakal.
Ah.
connection. It's very clear. Jesus was Nakad, right? He was smitten.
Right.
And he was smitten for our transgressions. And the reason why God told Moses to smite the rock the first time was it was illustrating Jesus being smitten.
By God.
Okay? So it's the same word, Nakah. Do you see that? Okay? And I showed it to you. It's not me just saying this, but it is clearly there, right? He was smitten or Nakad of God and afflicted, Isaiah says. Very interesting that that word is being used to demonstrate how Jesus was the receiver of that blow for our
It's
sins.
H551 though.
That's the same word. I mean, that's the same. Yeah, it's 5221.
221.
Where is it? Oh, there. Okay. Yes. That's an interesting Bible.
Okay. Now it's interesting. Although Moses failed in this regard, he ended up dying on the outskirts of the earthly promised land. But what do we see happen? What happened to Moses?
He's
Slave.
came.
Huh?
He was resurrected.
He was translated.
How do we know he was resurrected and how he was translated?
Jude
Jude.
in the book of Jude.
Jude verse 9.
Jude verse 9. Yeah.
It says, someone read this for us. Jude 9.
Yet Michael, the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee.
This is really interesting. If you compare this incident, Moses' body was being disputed by who?
Satan and Christ.
Satan and Christ. We know Michael, the archangel, is none other than Christ. Okay? Now, we studied this before. Archangel does not mean that he was an angel. Archangel means that that was his position as commander in chief over the angels. That was just the title, not him as a being. Archangel. Okay, so this is Michael, Jesus, the commander of the angels. He is contending with the devil over the body of Moses. Right? Why? Because Michael was coming. Whenever Michael's mentioned, Michael is always resurrecting people. Every time Michael's mentioned, he's resurrecting or fighting for his people. Okay, if you look at Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, you see Michael stands up for his people to deliver them. Right? So again, another deliverance. Right? Michael comes to deliver Moses from the by claiming his body and resurrecting him. But the devil says, "No, he messed up at the borders of Canaan. He doesn't deserve to even go to the heavenly promised land." And Michael says, "The Lord rebuke you." And he takes Moses up. Right? Delivered again. Delivered again from the clutches of the devil. Interesting. At the beginning and also at the very end. But it's interesting also that Moses, although he failed to speak to the rock, Moses afterwards did speak to the rock. You guys know when?
When he appeared to Jesus, with Jesus in the garden.
Right. Moses appeared on the Mount of Transfiguration with Elijah, and they were communing with Jesus. Remember that? And that rock was Jesus. And
That's Moses and Elijah.
And Moses was speaking with Jesus at the moment where Jesus was about to face the Nakah. He speaks to Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. Isn't that interesting? The connection is there. When you study the Bible, you need to see these connections. Okay, and it's amazing that these connections are clearly there if you actually look for them with a very clear, discerning eye. Okay, so any other thoughts based on what we studied today?
That's a lot of.
I would just like to say, the people didn't say, why did God bring us out? The people said, why, Moses, did you and Aaron bring us out? So that put Moses in a frame of mind of saying, they're blaming me, now I need to do something.
Or must I bring water out of this rock for you rebels, right?
Right, and the rebels said that he did this and he could have left them there.
Yeah.
And if the people had blamed God, then he would have said, this is what God said. But he was trying to defend himself because they had jumped on him so horribly.
Yeah. And it's interesting that Moses, he's grown so much since that first incident of killing the Egyptian. But isn't it sad that at the very end of his life, that's also what he did as well?
And that's what we want to do. We want to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
If people come against us, that's why humility is a hard thing when people are attacking us, even if it's for Christ.
Exactly. That's a lesson right there. That's an application point right there. And, also Moses, he was known as the meekest man on the earth. But even he, as the meekest man on the earth, was caught at a moment of weakness, and that costed him from entering the promised land. That if that could happen to Moses, that could happen to any of us, because I'm not meek as Moses, right? And so even the meekest man on earth has a breaking point or a moment of weakness that makes them vulnerable to reacting or self-defending in a moment of heated crisis. So that's a lesson for us to also learn. It's sad that Moses still had this pattern. At the beginning, we could understand that why he did what he did, but at the end, he also did it unfortunately at the end as well. But yet God still, this testifies to the grace of God. You may think in your Christian walk, look at how far I've come. Look how far I've matured. I've had so many experiences with God, and God has carried me through so many things. I've grown in my experience. I've become more, I've been able to be more closer to God as a result of it. But then at the same time, Moses experienced all those things, but yet at the moment of weakness, he failed. But even though he failed, God still extended his grace to him. And
I have a question.
Was there another comment?
I have a question. If Moses was able to go to the promised land, do you think he would have gone to heaven?
That, I don't know.
So striking the rock was a blessing in disguise?
Oh,
Well,
no way. Don't come to
no,
that conclusion.
No.
no,
That conclusion.
no.
Because then you get
Muddy in
into
the
the
water.
very, very iffy sort of reasoning by saying, where sin abounds, grace much more abounds. So I could just keep sinning, and His grace is gonna pull me out. But it's not a blessing disguise. It shows you the mercy and the grace of God despite our failures. I just want to remind you about our YouTube channel. If you haven't seen, Jeff has added our YouTube channels there. We have two. We have the Ultimate Bible Study, which is the full extent of all our sessions, including the sessions like this that we do week after week. And we also have the smaller abridged version of our channel, which is Ultimate Bible Study, just omitting the. So it's Ultimate Bible Study. That's the small, short videos. And the other ones have the full sessions, the Ultimate Bible Study. So check those out and share with others.